I would rather understand what I'm doing and understand what I'm testing and fail and not win in like an ad account or on a campaign than have a campaign be successful and me not understand what I did.
Good to see you, Modern Commerce subscribers. Casey and John coming back at you as always. Coming off of a really hot episode, I'd say. One of our best to date, I think. A great interview, if I do say so myself. Nick Shackelford, the head of Structured Social Agency, our new agency. And I got John here with me. John, how you doing, dude?
Crazy to say, like, yeah, we're Structured, head of our agency, founder. Yeah, dude, I'm doing good. Obviously coming from a new location. It's not my office, just, on the laptop today. So changing up the scenery.
Yeah,
and
destination.
Ready to do some podcasting.
Yeah, dude, let's get it. So today we were thinking of topics and we landed on, we got kind of an acting title, I think, of like words of wisdom / like favorite like expressions.
Yeah. I mean, some of them I think are expressions, but really this is just like, honestly, like probably the 6-7 best pieces of advice we could give e-comm founders, e-comm store owners, as it pertains to their sales and marketing. We're not logistical people. We don't know about product sourcing and that kind of thing, but just these are the things we see as we see lots of successful brands. This is the best advice we could give other brands, whether you're successful or not. It's just our best pieces of advice, really. I mean, I don't know. That's the working title, our best advice.
I'd say a lot of these pertain to just like headspace, like state of mind kind of things.
Right. Yeah. Your mindset. It's not like, use Facebook ads. Like, we're not talking about that today. We're talking about like mindset type things or ways to approach your business as an e-comm owner, as a person selling physical products on the interwebs.
Right. So we're not going to get crazy tactical today, but I still think there's quite a bit of good stuff coming our way. John, I got you slated as the first one. What you got for me, bro?
All right. So first up is priorities, right? Know your customers, actually.
There you go.
So yeah. We put them in order before. So first up for me is know your customers. And honestly, like this could, if you like stop watching this episode right now, don't do that. But if you really, really know your customers, like you'll probably end up being successful, or you'll overthink it. But if you're committed to selling them something, you're committed to making a business work, really knowing your customers, like that's gonna be what it comes down to, because everything else follows, right? So like building a brand that your customers love and buy from over and over again, that follows when you just really know them, understand their problems and the things they struggle with, and try and solve those problems with your products and with your brand. The way that you market it, the way that you come up with ad angles, the way you target, the traffic channels you use, the influencers you use, the press outlets you use, PR, all of that really follows from just like kind of either yourself or someone at your company really being that brand champion, and really I'll call it the customer champion, right? Like the advocate for the customers, and really knowing them and caring about them. Like I can't say enough about it. Like as a marketer, I will just say, like, very practically, when people have customer avatars and they can say like, hey, look, we sell a box that is it's a monthly box, subscription box of smoothie stuff. And I'm like, cool, thanks for telling me about the product. But when they're like, yeah, I mean, look, one of the things that it helps a lot with, that people buy it a lot for, is like pregnant women buy it because it helps them with morning sickness, and they can have breakfast and they can have these smoothies that like, make it so don't feel as sick throughout the day. Okay, like that is customer centric. That is about your people. And that is so much more powerful from an advertising perspective than the convenience of like, get smoothies in a box, right? Like that's just like, that's classic, like have stuff. Like, what do you have now that you didn't have before? Like that's every commercial you see, every ad you see, right? It's surface level and it's not powerful. But when it's like, hey, like get rid of morning sickness and get back to your day and like get back to crushing it, like that's powerful. So, and then the product's just the conduit to that end result. So when you know your customers, all of your stuff, as a marketer, selfishly, that's like the tactical like use case of that, right? Like it's your messaging is so much more powerful, and you acquire customers for less and you scale harder, which is what I really like to do. So yeah, I mean, know your customers. That's mine. I've kind of ranted on it for a minute. Casey, anything to add?
Yeah, I would just say this one, I mean, it seems pretty obvious. I think a lot of these will seem kind of obvious to some people, but this one I really think is cool because it makes sense from like a 6-inch view and a 1,000-foot view, right? Like knowing your customers, you know, on a microscopic level, knowing the demographic breakdowns, the customer avatars that you're targeting, things like that. Of course, that's great. But even just like that broader, like the larger view, just like, I mean, businesses are fueled by customers. So the more you know about them, odds are the better you can do, you know?
Look, at earlier this year, we helped launch a seat covers brand. Seat covers, that is not that exciting. Like a direct to consumer seat covers brand on Facebook. And, you know, they really catered to like not truckers, but people who drive trucks, which just like happens to be Casey's people. Like Casey knows these people, like this is his dad, right? And so it's like when he's writing that ad, when he's writing that landing page, it like he just talks to his dad. And it was, I mean, it was power. Like you would from the outside look at it and be like, man, I don't know if this is going to convert, but it was exactly what that person wanted, you know, and it was exactly the information they wanted. Exactly, like when they read it, they could tell this person knows me, you know, this company knows me, this company knows how important my truck is to me. And that, like, it just converts better, you know, practically. So it's like almost, I would even say like not even 6-inch view, 1-inch view, literally know one of your customers, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we don't always have the benefit of being, you know, squarely in the market of people that we're targeting for a particular brand. As marketers, especially, we sometimes work. I mean, any female brand we work with, John, we aren't female, so we don't know exactly. But if you can imagine that person, you know, 1 degree away from you, like a dad or a wife or somebody, and they happen to fall into the demographic, yeah, it's great to be able to just speak to them.
Right.
Anything to add on that one before I move on?
Nope, I think we got it.
All right, cool. So I'm going to try to get crafty with this and try my best to segue into the next one here. So as we go from know your customers, I'm going to go down this path here. You know, a common theme on this show has been how, you know, Facebook and other ad platforms, you know, it's been a struggle a little bit more lately since iOS 14 update. And, you know, you want to know your customers to battle that. But this leads me to my next thing, which is disruption either happens to you or because of you. And I bring up that iOS 14 because, I mean, if you've been an e-commerce brand in this year, I mean, you've probably felt that disruption. And I think most of us can agree it sucks. Like, we don't like that, right? But when you can be the cause of that disruption, when you can be the first in your market to a new strategy, you know, if you're the first to adopt influencer marketing, or you're the first to get on a new platform, like maybe you're branching out onto like TikTok and that's like a new thing for you, and none of your competitors are really there yet. You know, those can be such valuable advantages. So yeah, disruption can either happen to you or because of you. John, what do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is like people, this is, you know, true from a product perspective too, right? Like your products themselves either can like actually disrupt and make a difference to your customers, if you know your customers well, and you know, like the problems with all the other products that they use to do the thing that your product does. Your product can either like truly disrupt the market and truly like disrupt your customers' lives in a positive way, or they cannot. And if they do, then your job gets a lot easier, selling them more stuff and stuff like that. So, I mean, same thing, but yeah, from a marketing perspective, like you got it, nailed it, I think.
Yeah, and I think you did a good job at picking me up on that segue and tying it back into know your customer as put a little bow on it. I like that.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna hit my next point here. And the next point is, and this is maybe a little more related to like your actual marketing strategy and tactics that you're using. It's be a scientist. So man, especially on the marketing side, especially early days when we launch, we have this tendency to really just like gut optimize, you know, and kind of say like, I think this will work. I think this will work. So let's try this, or let's try this, or like even worse, we have this tendency to like just try everything and try too many things and spread ourselves too thin because we just kind of like hear about it working. Like what I mean when I say be a scientist is like, yeah, maybe you don't really have any learnings in a launch phase, or maybe you know, whatever your situation is, you can always like create a hypothesis and like narrow around that hypothesis. So instead of saying like, oh, we're gonna try TikTok and Snapchat and we're gonna see what works best, like that is a really loose and fast and loose way to just live your life. Like, what do you mean by see what works best? Like, I mean, legit, just say like, okay, my hypothesis is that Snapchat my hypothesis is that TikTok will be a more impactful platform than Snapchat from a ROAS. It will drive more customers than Snapchat. And my method for testing that, this is what I mean by being a scientist. This is what scientists do. They have a hypothesis they want to test. They set up a method for the experiment. My method for testing that is I'm going to put $5,000 into each of them, and I'm going to use the same creatives, or I'm going to use similar creatives. I'm going to use the same audiences. I'm going to use the same offer on both of them. I'm going to control the variables that way. Or I'm going to take these creatives, I'm going to make them as native to those individual platforms as possible, and I'm going to use the same offer on both of them. And that's how I'm going to control those variables. And then I'm going to see after 5,000 and spend on each of them, which has driven more customers. And I'm going to use a last click attribution model to measure that. And I'm only going to run prospecting, right? So you see how I just controlled all the variables. Like, I'm being a scientist. So I'm actually taking the signal on like, what channel is more worth my time, right? And I'm setting up a very real experiment. And maybe I get into that and I realize some other things. And I'm like, you know, yeah, TikTok might be more worth my time, but actually Snapchat, I think, has this incremental lift on all my other channels. So like, maybe it is also worth my time. So then I'm going to set up a whole other hypothesis and way to test that, right? I'm not just going to like keep spending money on Snapchat. That doesn't work. So that's like a really like tactical version of what I mean by that. And this is within ad accounts as well, right? Like, do the next most logical thing and like understand what you're doing. Like, understand, like, don't just like go and like be action oriented. That's great. But think through the actions that are actually impactful, and think through then how you're measuring the impact of those, so that you can eliminate and cross off the things that don't need to be on your list, and really like kind of focus in on the things that you need to know more about, or you need to continue to put resource into.
Absolutely. I think a lot of that goes with just like having structure to the things you're doing, know what to do with results of experiments. If you're being a scientist, the experiments you run, know what to do next with the results you get. Be a scientist is a great one, man. I think this is actually the first in a run that are not this, they aren't twins, but they're related. We've got 3 or 4 years. Yeah. Where I feel like, to somebody who's washing the dishes while they're doing this, maybe it's like, it sounds like they're talking about the same stuff all the time, but I think there's little differences that are important, because it seems like it's going the other direction, really. So when you're being a scientist, you need to collect data, you need structure, you need to know how to quantify a result. You need all kinds of things like that when you're being a scientist. But also, one of the things you have to do, and it's easy to look right past, but you have to be able to get it going, to get started. And this is actually kind of a trap that I can fall into sometimes. My personality type is prone to this, where sometimes I become so obsessed over doing something perfectly to where it takes me 10 times longer than it should to roll it out, and the saying I'm going with here is better done than perfect. This comes to mind in like a bigger build to me a lot of times. If I'm building like a full funnel for somebody or something, right? Like, you could take a month and build a fantastic funnel, right? But how much more of an advantage would you have if you got that funnel up and running within that first week or even a few days, and it has time to collect data, and you can be improving it throughout that month, rather than just going from 0 to 1 in that whole month, and just kind of back to that gut optimization thing you're saying. Like, you just you want to get it out there, you want to get it seen live action. You got a good player, you don't want to leave that guy on the bench. You want to get him in the game and see what he can do. So
I mean, just like, here's a thought experiment for you. Like, let's use your funnel example. Let's say over the course of a month, you spend 20 hours building the funnel and then you launch it. What if you had spent 2 hours building the funnel and then an hour launching traffic to it, gotten a read on it, and then you could do that essentially 7 more times to, by the end of it, like, you have 7 shots on goal rather than that one. That 6th or 7th funnel is probably, even though they're like less polished than that one you took a whole month building, that 6th or 7th funnel probably actually converts better and produces better results, right? So this is really what you mean by this from like a tactical aspect. I really like the phrase, and this is not a phrase that's in our plan, but like really like the phrase measure twice, cut once. You know, measure twice, cut once. Not just because it's like, oh yeah, and this is maybe what I meant by being a scientist, and how it goes with what you're saying is that it's like, it's not measure 15 times, cut once. It's measure twice and then cut. Like, don't cut and then, oh, I don't know, you know, maybe I should cut that again, or maybe I'm not straight, let me pull back out and cut. It's measure it twice, cut it once, go, right? So it's like, you know, a construction thing. You never get a project done if you measure 15 times. You never get a project done if you second guessed your cut, you know. It's the same thing. So think about what you're going to do. Like, don't just go and do it. Don't just cut without measuring. Like, think about it again. Think about the method and what you're measuring and what you're optimizing for, and then do it. Like, don't overthink it, right? Like, just get something out there, get that data, get the read back, and then measure twice and cut once on the next thing.
Yeah, I'd go as far as to say is measuring 15 times is probably just as bad as not measuring at all.
At all. Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Because that person who didn't measure once at all, they still might end up with a house built at some point. That person who's measuring everything 15 times,
yeah, you're dead. You're in the cold. Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna freeze to death before you ever build your house.
Exactly. Okay, so better done than perfect. So the next step is priorities. Priorities is sort of like the name of the game. And I think this works at a life level, right? Like, understanding where your priorities in life is super important, but this isn't like a life podcast. It's like an e-commerce sales and marketing podcast. So what I mean by this in the world of like selling your physical products is it kind of a callback to what I was saying earlier, is that like the very popular thing to say in digital marketing is test everything. That's like the thing everyone wants to say. And I say it a different way. I say it, be a scientist. So that the best intention people and the people who know what they're doing, when they say test everything, they mean don't make assumptions, be a scientist. But what people think is like, I need to test every single idea I have. We have like a specific formula we use, because if you test every single idea you have, first of all, you're doing none of those things well. And secondly, you're spreading your resources too thin, right? Like, if you're testing 15 different traffic channels when you launch, you're not really spending enough on any of them to, one, learn how to use them. You're not doing them well. And two, understand if they are actually working for you or not, or if you can optimize them or not, or anything like that, right? Or if you're testing, you know, a bunch of different like ideas you have even in a single ad account, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. You're not really being methodical about your testing, and you're not improving your performance. And you're probably just wasting a lot of money on unproven ideas, or spending a lot of money on unproven ideas, which leads to more wasted dollars. So this is what I mean by priorities. We kind of have a formula we use. It's ICE, it's impact, confidence, and ease. How high impact is this idea? How confident are we that it will be positive? Scale of 1 to 10. How high impact, how confident are we that it will be positive? And what's the ease of implementation? You know, the higher the score, the higher priority the idea. Yeah,
and I'd add on to this, you know, great stuff. I'd add on that we're doc people. We're document builders. We like, you know, maybe physical is the wrong word since it's all on computer screens, but we like to be able to see our different priorities kind of laid out in some kind of list form or however you want to organize it, rather than just let them like float around your head. You're like, yeah, I know my priorities. I know what I'm doing. Like, and maybe you do, but it's nice to be able to revert back to something that's kind of doing that recording for you, that holding of those priorities for you. And it's always something you can go update, kind of a living, breathing brain. We use docs like that a lot.
Yeah, you can update it and you collab on it, right? So like, I might get an idea in my head that I'm super bullish on for no particular reason other than I just like it. We put it into an ICE, like, you know, document. I put my stuff in there and I'm like, oh, it's super high impact. But then when I actually think about the other elements, well, my confidence level, it's a 10 impact, but my confidence level is probably only about a 6. And the ease of implementation is definitely like a 3, right? And so then you get in there and you realize like, oh, this actually doesn't have a high score because, you know, as high impact as it is. And at certain points in the game, you have to prioritize different things. You have to almost like weight different pieces of that score more, right? So like at a certain point in the game, you might be like, yeah, but impact is weighted double right now, you know, or something like that. But the other side of that is then Casey might go in there and he might score it up and his impact level on it isn't high and his confidence is lower or whatever, like it allows you to collaborate on this and check yourself and just be like, oh, is this just something like I heard about and I'm like biased towards because it was my idea? Or is this like something that we all feel is actually high impact?
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is a good segue into the next one here without, at the risk of sounding repetitive again. My next one here is, you don't know what you don't know. So I think that's a good example when you are doing those like ICE score breakdowns, person to person, why would you have separate scores? Like, why would I think something would have a bigger impact than you? Why wouldn't we have the same number? It's because we have a different perspective, and we might both be wrong too. The true answer might be right in the middle or on one end or the other of what we thought. So you don't know what you don't know. And at the end of the day, is scientific as you're trying to tie all these points together. As scientific as you're trying to be, a lot of times we're kind of assessing things and using our professional opinions and trying to give a certain score or a certain kind of, we're trying to make things fit as best we can. But at the end of the day, we're using our human brains and we don't necessarily know what the biggest impacts will be. And I think this kind of is the counterpoint to the priorities, where test everything kind of does, this is another way of saying it without saying test everything, because that's impossible. But you don't know what you don't know. You never got it figured out. There's always something else to chase. There's another carrot out there. There's another, magical combination that you haven't stumbled across yet, where, you're targeting a certain audience with certain messaging, and boom, you just created your new best campaign. If we're talking marketing, I'm sure the same could be said in products. All different kinds of things that relate to e-commerce businesses. You can't know what you don't know. And even millionaires who become insanely successful, don't know what they don't know. They just know what they do know.
Right. So where I see this creep up a lot, or my application for this right now, that's like really kind of like on me a little bit right now. And it's like, you don't know what you're going to find out later through learning and growing. Right. So it's like, I see this a lot with like when you're trying to build a process within your business, or when you're trying to build a strategy. We do this a ton, and I know other people who do this a lot, is they anticipate problems that are much bigger than they anticipate like the $100 million version of their $1 million problem, right? Or they say, okay, well, yeah, that's a solution for now, but what at this level of scale, that probably wouldn't work. Well, it's like, you don't know what you don't know. Like so many other things are gonna happen between now and when you get to that level of scale. Like you might not even be doing this anymore, right? Like you might not even be following this process or using this tactic or whatever it is anymore. And so like, especially from a process standpoint, number one, I think it can give you analysis paralysis and allow you to and make it so you don't get things off of your plate. You don't build processes. You don't do things that you should do, because you're like overanalyzing, like, okay, well, I have to build it perfectly so I can step away from it forever and it will work at any level of scale and in any situation and no matter what happens. Look, you don't know what you don't know. So like you kind of have to build it for now and maybe the next foreseeable phase. And then it has to be revisited, right? Whether it's a marketing strategy, an internal process, whatever it is. The other thing that can happen is like over processizing, right? So like we see this a lot with marketing, where it's like an owner, a founder will be like, okay, so what seems to work right now is if we launch 10 new Facebook ads per week in an ad set like this. And so then they go train people exactly like, oh, you launch this ad set to this audiences with 10 new ads. And then you take those ads that are above this ROAS and you put them into here. And then something happens in the future and like that process just doesn't really work anymore. And it was because it was too specific, right? It wasn't foundational. It wasn't principle based. So like creating kind of over processizing things that like, change really often. And trying to over processize, I think. So both like not creating processes at all and over processizing, I think, are the problems around you don't know what you don't know.
Sure. And yeah, you need some processes that are essential, but there is a fault to over processizing as well. But to your first point, John, though, like you can't forecast too far into the future. We got a little bit of time here. I'm going to go ahead and share like a quick little tidbit from our personal lives. Hope you don't mind. Back when John and I were like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed teenagers, we were in a two-man band. And this speaks to like, can't forecast too far. You know, we played a couple sets here and there, nothing crazy, but we were always debating, should we play like original songs we wrote? Super embarrassing to talk about that on here. Or should we cover songs? And your dad, you know, more of an accomplished musician, he said, you know, because we think like we can't just play other people's songs. Like at a certain point, there's going to be a conflict there. You can't just play other people's songs. And your dad, being the wise one in the room, is like, hey, if you guys ever get to the point where the Beatles come knocking on your door for like, you know, profits that you made off of their songs, you've already done something right. Like you've got like that's so far in the future, and it'll probably never happen anyway. And lo and behold, right, our band is no more. So
that's that $100 million problem you want to have, right? Like don't over index for that. Don't like, you know, trip over a dime to pick, you know, don't trip over $1 to pick up a dime, right? Like don't avoid that $100 million problem at the cost of what you're trying to do now, you know. And
I'll even add on, we all know that kind of person who they see that massive problem way in the future, and that stops them from even getting something going. You know, that's something, again, you know, we all know somebody like that. That kind of reverts back to better done than perfect. Just like, hey, if you think you got something, go for it. But anyway,
go ahead.
File on that one, but yeah, you don't know what you don't know, and John, you got the last one here.
Yeah, for sure. So so this is so the last one is don't be surprised by success. I mean this on two levels. I mean this in like the raw motivational way of like manifest success and be positive. Like that's cool, you know, but I'm not Gary Vee, so I'm not gonna like swear at you about not being surprised by success and expecting it. But what I actually mean by this is like, you said it, I wanted to make this a longer one, but it's confusing when you do it this way. But you said something to me last week that I'm like, man, I love that. Like, that's so true. And I've never said it that way. You said like, I would rather like, and this maybe goes back to being a scientist. Like, I would rather understand what I'm doing and understand what I'm testing and fail and not win in like an ad account or on a campaign than have a campaign be successful and me not understand what I did to be successful. So this is what I mean by don't be surprised by success. Like, don't get yourself in a position where your brand is growing, you're getting sales and stuff like this, and you don't really know why. You don't really know what you're doing that is successful, because then you don't know what to do more of. You don't know what your actual like threats are, what your exposures are, any of this stuff. And I think this is a super pertinent one right now, because in the last 3, 4, or 5 years, so many direct-to-consumer e-commerce brands have built on a platform where you literally could be surprised by success. Like you could kind of pour, you know, you could kind of pour creatives or pour an offer into this black box of Facebook ads, and it could just take off. Like Facebook finds the right people for it, and whatever, some combination of ingredients you put into that black box, it's like putting a whole bunch of things into a soup pot. And I didn't really measure any of it or really understand what I was doing, but it turned out really well, but I can't recreate it, right? That's been a lot of DTC brands over the last 5 years. And then they end up kind of saying like, well, this is what it was, you know, or this is what it wasn't. And they're kind of just guessing at it, really. And so that's what I mean is like, yeah, don't be like, expect success. Don't be surprised by it. That's cool, right? Like it's a cool mindset thing, but then, you know, also like understand what you're doing, so that when you are successful, you can reverse engineer it. You can understand like, okay, I did this thing and it was like not that great, and I did this thing, I made this tweak to it, and it converted much better, right? And so like, you know how you got there and 2 reasons that's important. 1, you can reverse out of it if it stops working, and 2, you understand like what your exposure is, you know. So I understand that my whole reason for success right now is this and this, you know, so I understand that like if that stops working, so I need to fortify that. And you understand what you can do more of. If you're surprised by success, you're just kind of like guessing at how to grow your company. And any projection you make, financial, sales, hiring people to actually help you in your business, you're just kind of like guessing that you're going to continue to be successful because you don't really know what's driving it.
You know, that's actually, that's an angle that I see on this one. Don't be surprised by success. You know, as you have a team, you know, maybe you're the leader of the team, maybe you're not, maybe you're just a member of the team, but as you're collaborating with people more, you know, maybe you've done something before, but somebody else kind of added a little twist on there. They added in that extra ingredient into that soup, and then it does kind of flourish and become something bigger than it's ever been in other times you've done it. you know, it's easy to have this stance that like, oh, that was kind of a fluke. Like they, you know, I know about this thing. Yeah, sure, they did that thing, but like, I know why this worked. You know, maybe you don't. Maybe that hidden variable, or maybe it's not hidden, but that external variable that somebody else added, you know, maybe pick their brain about that. Like, hey, how'd you come up with that? Why did you think to do that? Hey, like, was it something over here? Like, was it, you know, what was the opportunity you saw? And like, how could I see that opportunity for myself next time? You know, kind of that like iron sharpens iron, steel sharpens steel kind of thing. Yeah, don't be surprised when your team members help you out, because that's what they're there to do, and you can learn from them as well.
Yeah, I love it. It's like kind of like saying like, okay, well, instead of just taking it as like, if we're going to use that kind of soup or stew analogy, like, oh, when you add this seasoning, it tastes even better. There's a couple levels there. Like if you understand how the ingredients and measurements of the core soup work, you know, and then you just understand, oh, you had this ingredient and it tastes even a little bit better. I mean, that's cool. But if you even go deeper to understand like, okay, what's the principle there? Why is it the chemistry of that ingredient and the way it interacts with this and stuff, like you actually understand the core principle of why that ingredient makes it taste better, then it's like, oh, I get the other variations I can try. And I get, you know, if one doesn't work, why it wouldn't work, you know? And so it's like, you got levels there, right? Like you've got the core base principle of what you know works. You have other ingredients and variables that you can see if they work. And then when they do work, you can understand the core, you know, principles of why they do work. So yeah, like I love it, man. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, I'm not a writer, but I know one thing that writers say is like, write what you know, write about what you know. And I feel like that kind of goes along with this, where if you're sticking to some things you know, and obviously be trying new things and being a scientist, but if you're sticking to what you know, why would you be surprised when you have success, or when a team member helps you to have success? There's no reason to be surprised by that. Don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of success either. How about that?
Yeah, don't be afraid of
it. Yeah, man.
Got to work on that one, guy.
You know, I gotta say, you know, we did have a little bit of like crossover on some of our things here, but we kind of made our list separately and then mashed them all up together right before we started filming this. But I think it worked out okay, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I have one more story to tell, since we do have a little time on Write What You Know. Is again, back to our music days of when we had a band, me and you.
All right.
We used to do this thing where we'd hear a song and we'd think it was super dope. So we'd decide we wanted to cover it. We'd practice it like twice, and then we'd go play it like in a show. And we'd kind of like stumble through it and play it in a show. And I think I remember succinctly one time when we were like in a coffee shop or something like that playing. My dad was there. We stumbled through one we didn't really know. And we finished up, and I think you said something like, hey, anyone have any requests or something like that? And my dad goes, play one you know. Like we'd been playing a song we didn't know. Like, so yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's a bonus one, like do what you know, play what you know.
I think it fits into the overarching theme here of like, be a scientist, all these things, try new things, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel every step of the way. Just because we're saying, you know, I remember one of the first times I came on and I was just learning about like ad variations from you. And when you were like, hey, create 3 ads for me for this certain ad set, you know, wasn't super high priority. I was really raw, and I made you 3 just uniquely, completely different ads. And then you're like, hey, dude, when I said 3 ad variations, I meant like you can just change like the wording of like the headline on one, and then like maybe swap out like the image on it. Like they can share 90% of the same things, and I did, you know, 100% different things over and over again. And
you labored over it. Just
that like do what you know, you know, stick to what you know, but be a scientist, always be learning, priorities, all these things that fit together.
Yeah, for sure, man. So I think that's it. Like
yeah, hey, you want to take the parting shot?
I can take the parting shot unless you got something.
No, man, I'm all spent here. You take it.
All right. Yeah. So parting shot that I'll say is that like, I think it's like kind of 80%, like what we're talking about right now. We have some really tactical episodes of Modern Commerce, which are cool. And like right now is probably a good time. Casey could throw some of them all around me and stuff like that. So like, yeah, all the ones around me, those are more tactical and more like, here's some stuff you can take and do, you know, type episodes. But really like, this is the big difference. Like brands that are self-aware of like what they are and what their true strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are like way more deadly and grow better and acquire better and just do better in general than brands that aren't. So every time I start working with a new brand, I actually ask, what do you think is your biggest strength? What do you think is your biggest weakness? What do you think is your biggest opportunity and threat? I ask those 4 questions, and I can almost tell, like, there are almost some cookie cutter answers I could give you where the answer is really like, I'm saying this because it sounds good, but I don't actually know the answer to the question. And then there are some times where they understand what you're asking and they understand the answer to the question. They're more self-aware of their brand. And those are almost always the brands that have more success, that grow faster, that are more profitable, whatever it is your goal is in e-commerce. Those are the ones that are really self-aware of like what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, opportunities and threats. And so I think that's what we're talking about here, is like having the right mindset and having the right, mindset. It sounds so cheesy and guru-y, but like having living kind of by the right principles of business growth, of e-commerce growth, that allow you to be like very self-aware of where your business is and what it can do and what it's currently doing and what it needs to do better. And being really methodical about doing that, right? And not getting distracted and stuff like that. So really, I think that's the parting shot, is just like be super self-aware, for your business, and be really honest about it. Don't say that my biggest strength is brand, because that's one of those answers that's like, oh, you don't know what your biggest strength is. Unless you are like Nike, that's probably not your biggest strength. So that's it. Be self-aware, understand your brand, understand your business.
Words of wisdom to live by, John. So that's it, guys. Thank you for sticking around. If you've made it this far, please like our video, subscribe to our channel, hit that bell notification so you get alerts whenever we upload a new video to our channel. And just have a great day, and until next time, we'll see you.